This is not an isolated story. It is part of a larger universe. If you want to continue listening to the next chapters without having to search, subscribe now. The city had no sky. Not because it did not exist, but because it had been removed from collective memory. For generations, humanity lived under kilometers of concrete, steel, and successive layers of infrastructure in a subterranean mega-metropolis known only as the core. There, no one spoke of a horizon. The world always ended in curved walls, endless corridors, and artificial lights that never fully turned off. Time was not marked by the movement of the sun, but by programmed cycles. The day began when the lighting increased in intensity. Night arrived when that light diminished, simulating rest. There were no stars, no moon, no natural reference of any kind, only repetition, predictability, and routine. From birth, each inhabitant learned the same simple truth, transmitted without aggressiveness, without apparent imposition. The surface was dead. The planet had been destroyed by ancient wars, by accumulated radiation, by invisible toxins in the air. Going up meant death. Remaining below meant surviving. This information was not discussed. It was not questioned. It was taught. It appeared in school books, in official communiques, in screens spread throughout all sectors of the core. It was present in technical manuals, medical protocols, family guidelines. Information was not merely knowledge, it was structure. It was the silent axis that sustained all subterranean life. And every structure required constant maintenance. The core was divided into well-defined sectors: habitation, production, energy, administration, and transmission. It was in the latter that Elias Verne spent most of his adult life. Officially, he was a signal technician, responsible for checking old frequencies, eliminating residual noise, and ensuring that obsolete transmissions remained silent. In practice, Elias listened to what the system had decided to forget. While other operators devoted themselves to future communiques, official messages, and continuous updates of the central narrative, Elias worked with old files, discarded signals, echoes of transmissions that no longer had practical function. It was a job considered irrelevant, but necessary for the general stability of the system. That night, everything seemed to follow the habitual pattern. The servers maintained their constant hum. The lights remained stable. The core breathed in its artificial rhythm, indifferent to the passage of time. Until a pulse appeared. It was weak, almost imperceptible, buried under layers of static accumulated over decades. It did not correspond to any known pattern. It was not cataloged. It should not exist. Elias isolated the signal. The frequency was too old to be recent, too unstable to be accidental. There was intention there. Someone had spoken, and that speech had resisted time, hidden among failures and noise. The detail that changed everything appeared soon after. The transmission did not come from inside the core. It came from above. At first, there was only wind, an irregular, organic sound, impossible to be reproduced by the artificial systems of the subterranean city. Then, something even more improbable crossed Elias's headphones. Birds, a distant, living chorus, incompatible with everything he had learned since childhood. Then came the voice. It was human. If someone is listening, the surface is alive. Elias remained motionless. There was no alarm nor immediate reaction from the system, only the slow assimilation that something fundamental was wrong. The transmission continued in fragments, images converted into data, visual records of open sky, unfiltered light, plants growing freely. People walked without masks, breathing in air that did not kill them. He checked the metadata. The recording was not recent, it was decades old. Perhaps more. It was there, forgotten, buried under successive updates of the official narrative. The regime had always stated that the first attempts to return to the surface had failed, that no one had survived, that isolation had been a forced choice at the last possible moment. But that transmission said the opposite. The surface was not only habitable, it always had been. In the days that followed, Elias returned to that frequency repeatedly. He found other recordings, fragmented, dispersed through time like vestiges of an erased history. Accounts of communities living above, facing real difficulties, but breathing freedom. People who had chosen to remain on the surface, aware of the existence of the core. They knew that millions lived below, and even so, they never returned. That fact disturbed Elias more than the original lie. If the surface was safe, why had no one descended to free those who remained? If there was freedom above, why had it not been shared? When the system finally detected the anomaly, the reaction was silent. There was no panic, no visible blockades, only administrative procedures initiated discreetly. Elias was summoned. The White Room had no windows and no clocks. The architects of information were seated at the table, motionless, attentive. They wore no uniforms. Their power did not come from force, but from absolute control of the collective narrative. They denied nothing. The surface was habitable. It always had been. The error, they explained, was in the belief that people desired freedom. The first generations who discovered the truth had been invited to go up. Some tried. They returned shaken, not sick, not injured, but disoriented. The sky was too big. The silence was too deep. The absence of instructions caused anxiety. On the surface, no one told you what to do every hour. Freedom demanded responsibility. The core offered comfort. So the regime had made a choice, not to hide the exit physically, but to make it psychologically undesirable. It created the narrative of death, of toxicity, of the end of the world. It didn't need walls. A well-told story was enough. Elias did not respond immediately. The truth he carried now did not resemble liberation. It promised no redemption, no clear justice, no better future. It was just a naked fact, too heavy to be celebrated. For hours, he remained silent, observing the architects of information, trying to understand if there was any trace of doubt there. There was none. They spoke with the serenity of those who had believed they were right for a long time. The choice presented to Elias was simple: silence in exchange for continuity, stability, and anonymity, or transmission with unpredictable consequences. No explicit threat was made. It was not necessary. The core did not punish with visible violence. It punished with erasure. Elias understood that any decision would already be recorded even before it was taken. Even so, he chose to transmit. Not by impulse, nor by sudden courage, but by exhaustion. Exhaustion of listening to echoes of an erased past. Exhaustion of knowing something that should not exist only inside his mind. If the lie sustained the core, the truth needed at least to circulate, even if it changed nothing. He prepared the transmission carefully. He did not use official channels, nor did he try to invade central systems. He knew that would be detected instantly. Instead, he used abandoned frequencies, too old for constant surveillance, but still present in older devices, in less updated sectors, in rooms where background noise accompanied sleep. Elias did not plan to provoke escape. He planned only to tell. On the chosen night, the core seemed identical to all the others. The lights followed their cycles, people ended their shifts, returned to compact dwellings, adjusted rest panels. Millions of lives synchronized by the same comfortable narrative. Then the transmission began. There was no warning, no music, no symbol, just a voice crossing forgotten frequencies. Elias spoke calmly, choosing each word like someone stepping on unstable ground. The surface is alive. It always has been. He described what he had found, the old recordings, the communities above, the sky that did not kill, the air that did not poison. He did not show images immediately. He preferred words. He preferred time. The core did not react with chaos. The next morning, everything seemed the same. Routines continued. Screens displayed the same communiques. No official response was issued. The regime knew that denying would give too much weight to the message. Silence, in that case, was more efficient. But something had been introduced: doubt. It did not manifest in revolts or protests. It emerged in small details. Children drawing curved shapes and open spaces without knowing why. Technicians noticing discrepancies in old maps. Workers casually questioning why certain upper sectors remained sealed. Nothing organized, nothing declared, just discrete cracks in the narrative. The architects of information followed everything in silence. They did not need to act quickly. The core had always been patient. Elias was removed without announcement. His name disappeared from schedules. His records were archived. To the city, he had been relocated. To history, he had ceased to exist. Sometime later, the first people began to go up. Few. There was no impediment. Old doors were unlocked. Forgotten elevators began to function. The regime did not block the exits. There were no soldiers, no dramatic warnings, just access. Those who went up found exactly what had been described: wide sky, direct light, real wind. An imperfect world, without constant instructions, without universal schedules, without screens explaining each step. The surface was not hostile, but it demanded something the core had removed over generations: autonomy. Some remained. Most returned. They returned restless, anxious, uncomfortable. They reported a sensation of abandonment, of exposure, of lack of direction. The sky seemed too big. The silence seemed heavy. Freedom without structure felt like cruelty, not a gift. The core received them back, without punishment, without judgment, with collective relief. The official narrative began to adjust. It no longer denied the existence of the surface. It merely emphasized its emotional difficulties. It did not say it was impossible to leave. It only reminded how difficult it was to live without constant guidance. The lie evolved, and then it became impossible to deny. The regime had always known. The surface had been habitable for generations. But most of the population did not want to leave, not out of ignorance, out of preference. The core had infantilized humanity successfully. It had transformed dependence into comfort. It had removed the weight of daily choices, of consequences, of uncertainty. In exchange, it offered narrative security, a closed, predictable, controlled world. Freedom demanded too much effort. Elias had understood this before disappearing completely. His transmission had not started a civil war. It had started something quieter and deeper, a mirror. The core now knew it lived inside a lie, and even so, it chose to stay. A few continued to go up. They built small, imperfect, real communities. They did not try to rescue anyone. They learned, like those who came before, that freedom cannot be imposed. It only exists when desired. The years passed. The core remained. The lights continued simulating days and nights. The screens continued offering comforting stories. The surface continued there, open, silent, unhurried. Elias became a forgotten name, not a hero, not a villain, just a discrete inflection point in human history. His true legacy was not proving that the surface existed. It was revealing something more uncomfortable, that the greatest prison was not made of concrete or steel. It was made of narratives, and that many doors remain closed not because they are locked, but because crossing them demands too much responsibility. The surface remains alive. The sky remains there. The question was never whether it was possible to leave, it was always whether someone really wanted to. If this story accompanied you to the end, it does not end here. If you want to continue listening to the next chapters of this universe without having to search, subscribe now. The next video continues this story.